as Richard Mayer suggests, is above all an experience shared among individuals. However, it is not a common experience. It is a very peculiar one, because it is a transformative experience, which means that it must be able to transform my knowledge, abilities, and skills. Therefore, we suggest throughout this MOOC to consider learning as an experience that finds its focus in the exchanges that are generated among individuals. In this perspective, however, we must ask ourselves a question. How can we design an experience, specifically a learning experience? Let's not forget that there is a very interesting area in the design world called experience design, from which we can take some very useful insights. But let's try to recap what we have already collected along the way. First of all, this process of learning experience design happens in a more broad ecosystem, an ecosystem in which the teacher will have to create, firstly, the intended learning outcomes. In other words, he or she will have identified individually and with the students what point must be reached in terms of learning outcomes at the end of the class. The teacher will also have defined how to observe it by designing a test, evaluation criteria, and the strategy for giving feedback to the students. Can you remember? We have talked about Biggs triangle and about how important it is that intended learning outcomes should be consistently aligned from a logical point of view with the assessment system and then with what Biggs calls the teaching learning activities. Therefore, the learning activities that we prefer to call the learning experience. Once the intended learning outcomes and the assessment strategies has been defined, our proposal is to choose the pedagogical framework that we deem more effective to reach those learning outcomes with that specific type of students in that specific context. We will find ourselves in this ecosystem made up of intended learning outcomes, assessment strategies, and teaching framework or frameworks, because you can use also more than one. At this point, we can start delving into the design process of our learning experience. If we approach the design of the experience as we were designing an overly complex system that can be understood in all its parts, we can feel a little bit disoriented. So our proposal is to use a design tool which is called the Learning Innovation Network that helps us deconstruct the parts of the learning experience, so as to observe them and design them with more awareness and then enhance their integration. What are the components of this network? First of all, as in all respectable networks, there are nodes. The nodes are the subjects, the individuals entering the learning experience. Obviously, the students enrolled in the class, the teachers and assistants, but also external subjects, experts, bringers of experience that we choose to involve in the learning experience. As you can see in the learning network, the nodes are not hierarchically represented because their hierarchy can be reconfigured in time based on the teaching framework we decide to activate, thus attributing a different role within the experience to the single subjects every time. These subjects will communicate with each other through certain channels. But what are these channels? We will analyze them in more detail later, but they are the classroom, in other words, the most standard channel of communication among subjects in the learning network, the labs, but also books, the web, all the media that allow communication to flow between the nodes and activate itself. For communication that generates experience to happen, there must be channels sustained by content. Often, when we think about the content of a program, we simply think about a theme-based list of topics. But in reality, choosing the topics is only one of the sides of designing contents. Other important aspects are related to their specific typology. Examples, concepts, methods, strategies, original source material, their narrative structure. The contents can be organized in a deductive, inductive form according to a time or explorative logic that we consider particularly meaningful. Their format. We are talking about text, videos, digital materials, slides, interactive exercise, games, all the formats that we can think of using, even virtual reality, augmented reality. And another very important element is the source. Where does this content come from? Are they necessarily produced by the nodes of the network, so from teachers and students, or do they come from open educational resources, for example? The individuals within the learning network not only exchange content, but also carry out activities, which will be different based on the pedagogical framework we have decided to adopt. This could be defined as individual activities or group activities carried out outside the classroom or inside it. This depends on the pedagogical framework we have activated. Here we find another empty space in this learning network, and you might be wondering what is missing in the design process of a learning experience. One thing that is missing is very important, and it is the outside world. When we design a learning experience, we must not forget the enormous wealth that can come from the outside world, in all its form, physical, the territory, the museums, the exhibitions, events, companies, and virtual, online courses, e-books, digital repositories, MOOCs, databases, and so on. The learning network is therefore a tool that can help us start the process of learning innovation, keeping in mind a broader ecosystem made up of the intended learning outcomes, the assessment strategies, the pedagogical framework we have chosen. It helps us understand where we need to start in our process of learning innovation and to focus on our role as designers of a learning experience.